I want to ask you about representing violence in that film, but more in general. You know, like what's your approach to that? Why you feel that that's an important element to capture in your work?
I mean, up until Shaft, I said I wasn't going to have any kind of like violence that was like gratuitous or like celebrating violence as a kind of a cowboy mentality. And it's like, it's so funny. Like I ended up doing Shaft later on. I was like, oh my God, now my life is over. I'm having people getting shot for the enjoyment of an audience. If you look at all of my movies before that, time anything violent ever happened, there was an emotional impact. There was some loss, you know, and I always still, as much as I try to do that, whenever I have something violent happens in a picture, there's an emotional undercurrent to it. It's not something to be celebrated, because I think it's something about me as a person that I've grown up and I've seen so much stuff at a young age that I'm still affected by it. So that as a storyteller, I try to be very, very responsible in it.
Mm-hmm. Did you have issues with, you know, the ratings board, or what's your experience been in terms of violence with language?
No,
I've
never had any issues with the ratings board. I mean, like the stuff it's funny. The stuff I do on film is relatively tame compared to kind of like the murder porn things that other people do. You know, I think the only issues they've ever had is that the fact that some of the things are very emotional. You know, it's like, you know, it hits you on an emotional level. I think that's what. And sometimes that's more disturbing. It's easier for people. American audiences are so endeared to see violent acts, you know, like that they're like sexual acts are like, oh my gosh, but you know, to cut, dismember, and do all these different things, it's like, oh, okay, you know, that's just the horror thing, you know.
Wow. Yeah. So you were recognized so widely for the success of Boys in the Hood, including Academy Award nominations. Mm-hmm. What did it mean to you to be nominated, and for the historic aspects of those nominations?
I was very humbled. I was very humbled. At the same time, I was like, I didn't really allow myself to enjoy it, because I still had the kind of chip on my shoulder. Like, you said I wasn't doing it, and I did it, and I did it in a different way than nobody else do it. So I was like, you know, okay, that's fine. Now I got to have a career. You know what I mean? Like, thank God I didn't like go like, oh my God, you know, hey, you know, I did, because that what it gave me was a drive to continue to do good work, and not to sit up, you know, 20-some years ago and just have that movie and I hadn't done anything else. Right. And what it did for me is it gave me even more resolve to take, you know, what I was trying to do seriously. You know, recently I just got nominated for an Emmy for Best Directing for People vs. O.J. Simpson. And people ask me, so how do you feel? And I said, well, I kind of been through this before. And I said, what do you mean? I said, well, I got nominated for an Academy Award at 22, and now I got nominated for an Emmy for Best Directing. I said, and I still feel the same way that I did then. I said, well, I guess I need to think about taking this job more seriously. This directing thing, this director shit, I got to take it more seriously now. So, and for me, the Emmy nomination was because I decided to try to forge a different path in television, because filmmaking has evolved and changed. It's very difficult to do dramatic work on film, but television, you know, is such a great exploration of different ways to dramatize things and different time frames and story arcs and everything and stuff. And it's really intriguing to me, because you can do things that you can't do on film, and you can extend the life of different characters and the satellite worlds of different characters.
Wow. I want to ask you a little bit about the Remember the Time music video.
Yes.
How that project came about.
That came about because Michael Jackson called me, and it's crazy because there's well, I have to go back before I talk about Michael Jackson. I'd say this: there's only two people that in all of entertainment that I was ever nervous to meet. Those are like my idols, right? They are Steven Spielberg and Richard Pryor. And I have two stories. I was at the Comedy Store because I used to hang out at the Comedy Store a lot after Boys in the Hood, and I'd go see different comedians perform and stuff. And you know, a lot of them were young. You know, some of the Wayans brothers and some of the young comedians that were in the early '90s before Def Comedy Jam and everything. And so I'm there at the Comedy Store one night, and this man comes up to me. I think his name was David Banks. I think he was Richard's right-hand person. And he says, "You're John Singleton." I said, "Yes." He says, "Mr. Pryor would like to meet you." And I said, "Oh my gosh." So I go across the room, and Richard is there, and I think he was there with Al Pacino. And I love Al Pacino. God, you know, Godfather 1 and 2, Scarface, and everything he's done. But I'm looking at Richard. And so his MS was not as bad as it got yet, but it was slightly there. And he's really frail, really self-assuming. He comes up to me. He says, "You're the young man," he whispers, talking in a whisper. "You're the young man that made the movie?" And this is right when Boys came out. And I said, "Yes, sir." And he comes and he brings me and he gives me a hug. And I cried because I listened to Richard Pryor's records, you know, sneaking my mother's records and listening to him low, and admire him so much as a storyteller, and, you know, his rhythm and cadence and his just the soul that he had, you know, as a black man, and how he would politically infuse his humor with different things and take jibes at Nixon and the whole kind of the whole institutionalization of racism. Like, he has this great joke that's like, you know, he's like, you know, he says to talk about people being different, you know, it's all about some damn cash, you know, like racism is all about some damn cash. He says, that's what it is. You know what I mean? Like, you know, basically, like, you could take some people and because they look different, tell them you're going to work for free, and we're not going to give you shit, and we're going to treat you like shit, you know, and we're going to get rich. So that's it. And he just, the way he breaks stuff down, you know, he's like August Wilson, you know what I mean? August Wilson and Richard Pryor, you know, so that was the thing. And I used to hang out at his house, you know, and just, he'd be sitting at his bed, he had a gun right by his bed, and he'd be smoking his cigarettes, and all these comedians from all over Hollywood would come in, and they'd sit up and try to almost stand in his bed, like, want to get a piece of him, right? So I got a chance to see him, and as he kind of like degenerated, you know, with his MS and everything and stuff, to the point he couldn't really talk. But, you know, he's still a very, very phenomenal presence in my life. Whenever I feel anything, I want to recharge my storytelling batteries, I listen to Richard Pryor. Steven Spielberg. I saw Steven Spielberg first when I was 9 years old on 2020. I think he was directing Close Encounters, and it's like, that's what I was like, okay, that's what a director does. He's like he's on the crane, he's telling everybody what to do and something. Then I went to see Close Encounters of Torrance and stuff, right? So, boom, I followed every one of his movies as a kid, you know, through my teenage years and stuff. And, you know, he was the boy wonder kind. He was the guy who snuck onto the Universal lot and acted like he was an executive's kid, and he sit with the editors, and he would sneak onto the sets, and he would watch things, and he would make these small films, you know, and he ended up getting a television deal at the age of, I think, 21. Since Scheinberg signed him to do television. You know, he couldn't give him a feature, but he did some television. Then he did this TV movie called Duel that was a phenomenal success, and it did well in Europe. And then he got a chance to do Secret Line Express, and then he did Jaws, which changed the whole nature of the business with blockbusters. So he was the boy. So when I was going to film school, all the white kids wanted to be Steven Spielberg. You know what I mean? I said, I'm going to be Steven, I'm going to be John Singleton, but I can go in and I can try to do a movie and be younger than Steven Spielberg in my first movie. So that's why. When he was doing a movie called Hook in 1991, and before Boys came out, and I remember hanging out with a group of my friends, and these kids are not street kids. They're like black middle class kids that I knew and they were around. And I had this hat that said South Central Cinema, right? And they were like, "Oh wow, this is the Hook set. Spielberg's working over there," and sure enough, he comes out and he's on this big rock cell phone, and he's talking. I was like, "Oh my God, look at him, he's over there." And he's like, "Go talk to him." My friends are always, "Go talk to him. You can talk to him. You talk to him." And so I said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go talk to him." Right. So we walk onto the set of Hook, the pirate ship and everything and stuff. This is before the CG stuff. And Robin Williams God bless his heart. He sees us all coming. He sees all these black guys coming. He looks at Robin Williams like, he walks away, right? And Stephen looks at us and he says, oh, he's looking, he clocks my hat. He says, oh, South Central Cinema. He says, is that USC? I said, yeah, I went to USC. My name's John Singleton. I said, okay, we meet each other, say hi, and this. And then Kathy Kennedy had him watch Boys in the Hood. So then we ended up having lunch, a few weeks later. And so I'm sitting here, with my idol of idols, you know what I mean? We ended up forming a friendship over many years. And I've learned so much more from my casual conversations with him about film and in life and everything. He's a consummate, as much as his movies are great visualizations of their stories, this guy could tell a story orally better than anybody else. The stuff that that's one thing I learned from him. They say great storytellers can spin a yarn. He can spin a yarn. The way he just, I asked him, did you ever meet Hitchcock? He says, the way he tells a story about how he met Hitchcock and sneaking on the set of Torn Curtain and seeing Julie Andrews from afar, and it's over there, and he sees Hitchcock behind a chair, and he's walking over, and he's just about to tap Hitchcock's shoulder, and he gets stopped by security. Steven Spielberg, young Steven Spielberg, and he's like, and he doesn't get a chance to Hitchcock doesn't even turn around. But the way he tells the story is like one of his movies. You know what I mean? And he can spin stories like this. So it's like, it's whimsy. He has a kind of a whimsical sense and everything.
Then you get the opportunity to meet Michael Jackson.
Okay, so Michael Jackson. So I always knew I was going to be Michael Jackson. I mean, it was just like I knew I was going to be Michael Jackson. I grew up listening to Michael Jackson from a childhood, listening to 45 records, in elementary school when they had a little 40 record player. So I wasn't surprised when I met Michael Jackson. I wasn't nervous. He had been part of my family, literally my whole life. And so we sat up and we chopped it up, and he asked me what I thought of his album. He had an album coming out, Dangerous. I said I liked the tracks that they were playing on black radio, and these are the tracks I'm interested in. If you wanted, he asked me what I thought of the last video. I said, it's all right, but I think I can do better. And it's just because I'm a kid, and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm supposed to hold back and say, I'm just like, this is what I think. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to put you with a whole bunch of black people. He said, okay. So what do you want to do? I said, well, let's sit and chop it up and figure out, and let's do something. And so as we started talking about it and I was writing up, he would add elements. He said, we should think about getting Eddie Murphy in this. And I said, let's call him up. We called Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy was down. We put it together and we're thinking about getting Iman in it. Let's call Iman, let's get it out. And then Irvin Magic Johnson came out and did that big press conference about his HIV status. And then Michael said, you know what? We should do something for Magic. Find something for Magic. Let's do something for Magic. And we put Magic Johnson in it.
Wow. And
so and that's the kind of person Michael was. And we shot it on the Universal lot on the biggest soundstage there. I think it's stage 11. And
that was your first soundstage experience?
That was my first. Yeah, that's my first sound. It was the biggest soundstage, one of the biggest ones in Hollywood.
So how was that different for you in terms of
Well, I was used to shooting on location in small environments and small homes and two family homes and on the streets, and I'd go right to shooting on the biggest sound. So it was like when you're in it, you don't even know you're in it, just in it. That's okay. This is what life's going to be like.
But what did you do differently in terms of what you could do with your camera angles or with?
Well, I mean, there, I'm able to work with Luma cranes and Techno cranes and different heads and stuff, and we called together some of the best hip hop dancers in the country, that people who had worked with. Jodeci and Mary J. Blige and all the hip hop stars got a chance to work with Michael Jackson, who they had studied from all his videos in the 80s. And my choreographer was an extra in Boys in the Hood, Fatima Robinson. She was 19 years old. I brought her to do Remember the Time. And she said, can I do this? I said, we're going to teach Michael Jackson some new moves. Yes, you're going to do it. And got her with Michael, and it was just magic, the way they put it together and everything and stuff. And Michael was such a phenomenal student of dance and movement and everything and stuff, and also minimalization of movement. You know, he studied Bob Fosse. You know what I mean? He studied Fred Astaire. He studied all of the. He gave me a Laserdisc player, and gave me Busby Berkeley musicals. You know, Gold Diggers in 1933 and 35 and stuff, right? And then we incorporated that stuff within the body of the piece, but we did it with kind of a hip hop tendency to it, right? You know, it was a phenomenal experience.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah. Was there any relationship between working with Michael Jackson and then working with his sister Janet Jackson for Poetic
Totally
Justice?
different. It was totally different because I had met them totally disparate from each other. And Janet actually went to the school I talked about, Portola Junior High School. She went there a year. She was a little ahead of me, you know, kind of periphery. So, and you know, but our relationship doesn't go back to then. It goes back to, you know, me seeing. I used to hang out on the set of the movie Hook. I would tag around Steven because that year when Boys in the Hood came out, Columbia Pictures was doing Steven Spielberg's Hook, Francis Coppola's Dracula, and what else were they doing? They were doing, so I was like basically the kid that made a movie, and I would just go and I'd go and hang out with Steven. I'd go hang out with Francis. I'd watch Francis film. I'd sail up with Francis in this thing he had called the Silverfish, where he'd sit up and it's like a camper, and he'd have these different monitors and stuff, and he would it's kind of like a television studio, and he would direct from it and everything like this. And I mean, these were people who I had studied not only in school but in life in terms of, you know, what they'd done filmically and stuff. And they were just getting to the point where they were, you know, older men and wanting to impart knowledge. And so I would just suck it all up. I would just suck it all up. And everything that they taught me in our casual conversations is all gone in my films for all of these different years. You know, in terms of like, you know, doing creative blocking with, you know, choreography with the camera and the actors and stuff. A lot of people, they try to make camera dictate the actors, you know, but the actors are the organic element. The actors have to dictate all of the different movement. It's like, to be a good director, you have to have a sense of all of the arts. You have to have a sense of painting, photography, dance, literature, music. You know what I mean? So you all those things come into play whenever you're making any type of small decision, whether or not it's the macro or the major decision, comes from your immersion within all of those arts. And I wouldn't say it took me years to understand that. I think when I was younger, I had a kind of an intuitive sense of what that was, and I did it, but because when I started to have some maturity about me, and even you know, and having more of an immersion in all those various arts, that's when the way I personally express myself and what I do has evolved and changed and become different.
So all of that then, is it affecting your writing in a different way once you have a movie
definitely.
under your belt, you know?
Definitely. It affects the writing as well.
So as you're developing Poetic Justice then, they go back to that moment, you know, what is it that you're trying to achieve with that project? How does my
that movie, I mean, I was like, I was 23 when I wrote it, 24. I was like, that movie, it's a good movie, but it's not as good as I would want it to be because I wrote it really quickly. I'd say that. A lot of people think, oh, it's one of their favorites. It's because I wanted to do something more benign and heartfelt in a different way than Boys in the Hood. I want this, you know, Boys in the Hood is such a kind of like male-dominated machismo kind of thing that with the second movie, I think, you know, what's the toll of this youth violence taking on these young women? You know what I mean? Like, you know, so that was my whole crux about that, you know, like, and the sense of how do you have romance within this environment? So I was like, you know, I want to make some type of exploration of that. And mind you, with the huge, phenomenal success of Boys in the Hood, I had to get another movie out quick. And so I was writing it and everything, and I ran into Janet serendipitously on the Hook set, and I said, I'm writing a movie for you. She's like, oh, like any actress. She's like, oh, really? I said, well, this is what I want to do. Give me your number. She gives me her number, we hang out, and it's up, and I'm writing it, and I was able to go to Columbia Pictures, and I said, I got my next movie. This is what I'm doing. Okay, John, you want to do it? This is, no, I'm doing this movie. You guys want to do this movie or not? So, okay, well, who do you want to star it? Janet Jackson is starring it. How about that? Okay. She hadn't done a movie. So, and actually Ice Cube was supposed to be opposite her. And he was like, I can't do no romance. I said, you're a good looking dude, man. I said, you know, chicks like you. I can't do that. And I ended up seeing a sneak preview of Juice. And I had known Tupac peripherally from around, you know, just around through Queen Latifah. I met him in New York, and then I saw him around LA and in the Beverly Center stuff. And so I called him up and I was like, hey man, I saw your movie. We got to chop it up. You want to do a movie with Janet Jackson? He's like, yeah, I'll do a movie with Janet Jackson. I said, well, you got to come in and screen test. So we screen test Tupac and Janet because they were nervous about either of them or both of them acting. And we screen test them together. That scene in the that's in the beauty salon at the desk, magic, green light.
Amazing, amazing.
It's a good thing that I was young, and that it has, you know, sometimes the flaws help something because the flaws in the language and everything and stuff of the cursing and all that stuff make everything that's very, very erudite and very, you know, elevated play very well. I mean, I feel bad that when I showed it to Maya Angelou, she's like, the cursing. And I said, yes, man, but the cursing. And I was like, oh my God, it's like your grandmother telling you, like, you know, my boy, what are you doing to me, right? So, but hey, you know, the movie did well and it got me over the hump. It got me. It was a successful movie financially and it had some memorable moments and, you know, started a relationship with Janet and Pac, you know. The tragedy of it is that it's the only movie that Tupac and I were able to do because we formed a kind of a kinship on that picture that, you know, I wanted to write songs and he wanted to like write and direct movies. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to show him how to do that and he would show me how to do the music. The movie that I did after Poetic Justice, Higher Learning, he was supposed to star in. Mm-hmm. So I wrote that for him to star in. And it, I mean, like, he was going to star in that movie. Leonardo DiCaprio was going to be in that movie. Gwyneth Paltrow was going to be in that movie. The original cast of Higher Learning, like, you know, it's a good movie, but if you think about who was supposed to be in the picture and then what ended up happening and all these disparate people ended up falling out of it, it's like, oh my God, it's going to be a revelation. It was like, you know, I was trying to do something that was like, yes, it, you know, it had these broad symbolisms and messages in it and everything, but it was like really much a youthful picture of the time. It was an amalgamation of what was happening in the hip hop scene and the grunge music scene and stuff, right? Nirvana had just come out, you know, and hip hop music was at its zenith. And so it was like I was putting all these different disparate people together within a college campus and making, you know, magic.
Were you reflecting on your own college experience in that?
Yeah, some of that was USC. Some of it was like, you know, it was like a little ding at USC a little bit. You know, USC didn't give us permission to shoot the movie on the campus. Mm-hmm. We ended up shooting at UCLA and making it look like USC.
Wow. And that film has, you collaborated with Saul Bass, right, for the opening. Could you talk about that experience?
Saul in the Lane. Yeah, that came about because I saw, you know, of course I saw the work that he did so well with so many different filmmakers, including Hitchcock and what he did with Vertigo and Psycho, and Marty Scorsese started to use him, and I was like, you know, I just wanted to be around legendary people, and I just called Saul and Lane in, and they did a title sequence for me. It's like I gotta step it up, you know.
Incredible. So let's talk about Rosewood. Mm-hmm. Yes. This is your first period film.
Yes.
What attracted you to that project, and why did you think that was an important story to tell?
I read an article in Esquire magazine about the Rosewood incident, and I saw it. It was on a newsstand. It was on a newsstand in Robertson, and I think of Robertson and Beverly. And I opened up Esquire, I used to go to newsstands late at night and not buy the magazine. I just read the articles in the magazine. I just leave it up there. Not that I was cheap, but just like I was just at the end of just going, just out of lark and reading it. So I read this article, and I it's not that I didn't think anything of it. I just like, that's just terrible, right? And then John Peters, who actually was running the studio when I did Boys in the Hood, but he ended up coming out of that deal at Sony. He bought the rights to the Esquire article. So John Peters called me up and said, I bought the rights to this thing. I want to do it with you. And so I looked at it again, and then he sent me down to Florida. And mind you, this is the first time I'd ever been around people who actually had been victims of of historical institutionalized racism. As I've been down to the South before on trips and stuff. They send black kids down South a little bit for the summer and stuff. But to actually be there with people, these people were in their, at the time they were in their 70s and 80s, some in the 90s. And they were telling me the stories about what happened, in 1922, during when their town was like burned and, the land was taken away from them and people were murdered and killed, by this incident, Rosewood incident. And I was like, whoa, I was floored by it. I originally had plans to do this other picture that Frank Price bought the rights for me for a book called Makes Me Wanna Holler, which I still want to do. And so I was like thinking, okay, this is interesting and stuff, right? And I'm leaving, talking to these people, and mind you, the younger generation stopped me. Now, mind you, they're in their 80s and 90s, so the younger generation is like in their 60s, right? The 50s and 60s. And it's like thick black women, they got the big old arms and stuff like this and like this, like the big mama arms. And this one woman, I forget her name, she's an aunt and stuff, right? She's like, baby, you gonna do the movie, right? I said, well, ma'am, I gotta get back to LA and I gotta look it over the stuff and I gotta like think about it and everything. Cause I'm still thinking maybe I'll do Makes Me Holler and maybe I'll figure this out. And then she says, she pushes me with all the boobs and the arms and everything in the corner. She says, no. I was like, no, she says, baby, you have to do this movie. You have to do. If you don't do this movie, the story's not gonna be told. You have to do this movie. She says, listen. I said, okay, ma'am. This. She says, I'm trying to get past her, and these big old boobs and arms and stopping me and stuff. She says, listen. Either you do this movie or Steven Spielberg's gonna do the movie, and we don't want him. She says this to me, right? And I said, okay, ma'am, right? So then I go and I look at the article, I look at the old newspaper accounts. And then I started reading about how there were several soldiers coming back from World War I. And they were black men who fought, they were the first ones who actually fought outside of the country, for the freedom of this country. And their exposure to Europe and fighting the Germans and everything, changed them mentally to have to come back to deal with institutionalized racism in the South. And so, and there's always this falsehood within American historical records and everything like this, that black people were so benign in their persecution. And I've always hated that because, in my family, they tell stories about, we didn't always get our ass kicked. You fought back, you had to move. That's why a lot of people, the Great Migration, when all this stuff, it was not just the Great Depression. When you have people who are persecuted economically together, poor whites and blacks, it's going to be some stuff, right? Some shit happening. So a lot of people went up to Chicago and New York, but within those skirmishes of the institutionalized racism, there were rapes, there were murders, there were assaults against children, and black people didn't all just take that shit. They fought back. You know what I mean? So, but they the white mainstream never writes about that. So, and I just said, you know what? I know that this happens. And my grandparents and great-grandparents know this happens, that people fought back. If there's a character in here that's come back from the war, I can find a kind of a sense of things of some type of resonance with contemporary audiences that is historically based in fact that I can put within the story, because that's what they were saying in the accounts. It says some of the World War I veterans were fighting back once their families were being murdered. And so that, that's how that came about, the character of man that I got Ving Rhames to play. So I called up Ving Rhames because I loved him in Pulp Fiction. And I said, mind you, it was possibly going to be Denzel Washington and Tommy Lee Jones. But Denzel wanted me to wait. And he had said, maybe Denzel said one thing wrong. He said, maybe we don't know it was a white guy that did this. And I said, nah, man, I can't wait for you, right? And then my mother said, you got to get a black man that's kind of uncut. Like, he's not chiseled. He's like uncut. And this guy, Ving Rhames, looked like Jack Johnson. And so Ving Rhames, I said, if you do this movie with me, nobody will remember that you got fucked in your ass in Quentin's movie. So I promise you, I'll make you look so badass that nobody will remember you got compromised in that movie. And I still make fun of him too. And so Marion Doherty, who's a classic casting director, she did a lot of movies with George Roy Hill. And she did so many different pictures over time. She discovered she did I think she did Midnight Cowboy with John Schlesinger. Marion Doherty and Associates. She was in New York for many years, right? We're trying to figure out who else is going to be in the picture, and she says, "Why not John Voight?" And I was like, "Wow," because John had taken a hiatus. So John comes in, he has a meeting with me, and we're sitting there sizing each other up. And I'm like, I'm fucking sitting here with John Voight. I'm like, wow, from Coming Home to Midnight Cowboy to a great movie that he did, Runaway Train. I think he was nominated for Best Actor for that too, Andrei Konchalovsky. And, we're just talking and stuff. And so we went, me, Ving Rhames, John Voight, and Don Cheadle. We went down to the South and we went up making this movie. And we took 2 or 3 acres and we built 2 towns. We carved out both of these towns out of swampland. We moved houses. We set up a mile length of railroad track. We airlifted a vintage train from the 20s and put it on the track and everything and stuff, right? And we made the town of Sumner, which was the white town, which was a company town, which was based on the lumber industry and the cedar mill industry and stuff, right? The company actually owned the homes of the people. They owned the store. They kept those people, and there were white people kept in economic persecution. They had to work at this company, and the company would just keep them in debt. And then you had the black town of Rosewood, where because it was segregated, they basically were subsistence livers. They had to grow their own food. They had their own livestock. They could sell. I guess it was, they had a little bit of cedar, and they said, I think of the turpentine, they made turpentine and stuff. And they weren't rich, but they had their own thing, there was this economic tension. So what I was trying to do was show people that, that a lot of this stuff in terms of, this all goes back to the old Richard Pryor joke, a lot of this tension comes not just from the differences of how people look, but also people having assumptions of well, like the character says, like, like, why does that nigga have a piano and I don't have one, right? Mr. Cumner, who's the rich white guy on the hill, who's fucking everybody, he has a piano, and that nigga got one, I don't got a piano. So that's what racism is. It's like, it's just like who's got a one-upsmanship on anybody. And so you put in that and an undercurrent that, and you have a kind of combustibility. So you have even more of a moral conundrum on it. And I think that's what makes that picture more profound, because it's not the broad strokes of villainy and there's shades of gray, of right and wrong and whatever. So
yeah, Esther Roll's performance in that film is very powerful.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that relationship?
Well, Ruby Dee was supposed to play that role, and she pulled out of me like 2 days before, and I wanted to work for her for whatever. She said, "Baby, I can make more money speaking than doing your little movie." So I was like, oh my God, I don't have a mama. What am I gonna do? I don't have a mama. And so we were like, well, who can we get that when these white folks kill this black woman, that everybody black in America gets mad? And it was like, well, shit, we're going to get Florida Evans some good times. It's like, yo, everybody going to go crazy then, right? And we called up Esther 2 days before. Esther, listen, I really need you to get down here. I'll pay you this. Please, honey. And she came down and she did the movie. I had fun working with Esther Ross. She was like in her late 70s. She was from Pompano Beach, Florida. She lived in that time that this thing actually happened. She would tell us stories about how her father would not let her or any of her sisters as a young girl work for any white families because, you know, like that movie The Help, that's bullshit. These women were going through real shit. They could be raped and they couldn't say anything. You know what I mean? Because they're under segregation. So, and even my grandmother would tell me stuff like that. And so, you know, she did a great job. There's a story I tell not very often. I'm really good to my actors. I don't want anybody to think I'm a horrible actor, but this is a good story. So Esther, she's in her 70s and she's got this one scene to do. It's not that much lines. She's flubbing her lines, right? And then we're on the 5th take, and she says, "I can't do this. I got to go to the bathroom," right? And I'd be like, "Esther, you get this take right, you're gonna go to the bathroom. You flub your line again, we're gonna have a problem. And everybody gonna know." She got it on that tape. See, those are the kind of stories I love. I love that kind of stuff. You can't get that anywhere else.
You can't. This is great.
I was going to put that in my book.
You still can. You still can. You must, I think. I want to ask you about 2 other collaborators on that one. John Williams for the score and Wynton Marsalis. So could you talk about that process of creating the score? Was it different, and how that was different from?
Well, we scored the movie before. We scored the movie with my friend Wynton Marsalis. So I went and scored the movie, and we did it here at Lincoln Center. And you know, he'd write the cues, and he did, Wynton is a genius. He's this generation's Ellington. You know, he can play, he can write music, he can write different parts of different music for any type of orchestra and give it to him stuff. And we did it, but it was too jazzy. It was really a cool score, and that score actually ended up later on. Ken Burns called me later on to use it for a documentary about Jack Johnson, Unforgivable Blackness. And so Kenny Burns used it in his documentary later on, years after it was with. And I had to go to Wynton and say, after we'd been up in Lincoln Center for nights and nights and nights working together and seeing him with the score, this doesn't work, man. It's too jazzy. It's taken away from the motion. And I used a couple of cues. So then I call up Johnny Williams. We show Johnny Williams the picture at Warner Brothers. Johnny Williams watches it. And he says, well, I got to see if Steven's doing anything else and everything like this. And Steven wasn't doing it. He says, yeah, John's my friend. So then I go and I'm working with John Williams. Like I grew up literally listening to certain cues, music cues from John Williams' music in high school. Like I'd wake up and brush my teeth to the last cue of Star Wars where Luke Skywalker and Han Solo get their medals from Princess Leia, right? With that opening. I would play and do my homework to keep me awake. I would play the truck cue from Raiders of the Lost Ark that would go, it starts off in the movie. He says, Salah says, they board the Ark on a truck, and he says, what truck? And it goes, dun, 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 dun. So I know his music going all the way back from all the different pictures, right? We sit at his office in Amblin, and he's at the piano. And I said, okay, Johnny, you're a genius. You've done these spectacular classic scores, but what do you know about the souls of Black people? This is different. This is like, this is the heart. This is like, this goes all the way back to slavery, all the way through emancipation, through, pain and joy and everything. And he says, well, John, before I was a composer, I was an arranger. I hope I'm doing it right. And I arranged around 6 albums in the 60s for Mahalia Jackson. You ever heard of her? And I was like, okay, I can't tell you shit. I was like, so he goes and he starts playing and stuff with the piano because he tracks it on the piano. He does it there. And we have a spotting session with his music editor. I think his name's Kenny. And he's going over the movie and he's giving copious notes of what he wants to do on every different thing in the movie. And he says, in this moment here, I want a nice Waxman pause here. And I said, does that refer to Franz Waxman, the composer? And he says, yes. He said, yes. So, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm fucking sitting with John Williams, like working on the score of my movie. I'm 27 years old. I'm like, I can't believe this shit, right? And he wrote an amazing, amazing score for that picture that just gives the emotion of that, you know what I mean? He brought in choirs and phenomenal. It was a phenomenal experience working with him.
I want to ask you about working with child actors, which happens in that movie, and some of your other ones as well, and especially how to direct younger actors when you're putting them in very intense situations, violence, right? Strong language. What kinds of guidance do you give them in those moments?
It depends on the actors. I mean, some child actors are professional actors, and some of them are just kids, you know. Gosh. Some of them are nightmares, and some of them are like just great because they're just kids. And I think that what you want to do is just get them to just be kids the way that children would react in these situations. On Boys in the Hood, most of the kids, except for the little young Trey, they were all really from the neighborhood. The kid that played Doughboy in Boys in the Hood, he's still a friend of mine. His name is Beha Jackson. He lived a block away from where we were shooting. And so, like, you know, when he was still in elementary school, so and he became like my little brother. And, you know, I was 22 when I did that, and I think he was like 10, 11. So he was just always under my arm and everything and stuff, right? I'm gonna tell a story I should tell a story about it, so because fine, it's just a boy thing, and I knew nothing about directing and everything. So on Boys in the Hood, he has a scene where his brother gets the ball taken away from him, and the guy takes the ball away from him, and little Doughboy goes and confronts this older boy, and he says, "Hey, give me my brother's ball back." And the guy says, "What you gonna do? What your fat ass gonna do?" And then Beha, I had him kick the guy's legs, and the guy does a kind of a stunt smacking him. He falls down, and it kicks him in the stomach. So then when he kicks him in the stomach, there's this close-up of Beha's face, right? And Beha's got to go, oh, like this, right? And so I have the camera down there on the ground, and I say, okay, he's going to kick you. He's going to kick you in the stomach, and he kicks his stomach, and then, he goes like this, And, you know, he just not acting it right? And I said, okay, well, listen, you got to get this right with this. I said, get ready. He's going to kick you in the stomach, right? This with this. And he says, you ready? And I'm off camera. Now, mind you, me and this kid, I'm 22, okay? He's 11, but he's like my brother, okay? He's like my little brother now, right? He's always with me. I take him to see Dances with Wolves. I take him to movies like this. So I'm off camera, and he's going there, and I punch him in the stomach. And his fist goes, this and this. And he gets up. I said, okay, that's good. He gets up. He starts tearing up. I said, you did it, dude. You did it. You know, because we're like hard. You did it. You did it. He's like crying. He's crying, and everybody's congratulating him. But it's like, it's roughhousing. You know what I mean? I've never done it to anybody else. But the kid's like my brother. You know what I mean? Like, you know, he's a chef now and everything and stuff. But when we did the 25th anniversary of Boys in the Hood in the park in L.A., our Apposition Park, we told that story to everybody in the park. They say, but it's like, you have to get children to be children, you know, and to be comfortable, you know, at reacting in the way. You can't over-direct, because what's indelible about children is just having them basically, you know, reflect on this in a reality situation, not necessarily a created reality situation. And that's what I think, you know. Some kids I try not to be chummy with. I like to just get a natural reaction from them, you know, and just put them in the environment. And I like working with kids that aren't necessarily professional actors more than professional kid actors. That's just something about the way that they respond to certain things in scenes that it just surprises me.
That's really great.
Yeah. Rosa was my zenith in the dramatic thing, because I was like, I always wanted to be taken seriously as a director, and that was like the most serious thing that I could do, right? Because it was so serious that certain people were like, they could respect it, but they could respect it from afar. It's not like you have something like that come out now, and the studio shelved it. The studio
did it have the impact that you wanted it to have? It
didn't have the impact because, I mean, they wouldn't even allow me to take it to the Baptist conventions. I said, I could take this movie to all the ministers 6 months before it shows, and by the time it comes out, everybody will know about it. And they wouldn't even, because they were nervous about the content of it. They were like, they were nervous. Warner Brothers kind of shelved it. It's not like 12 Years a Slave or these other pictures coming out now, like this. So, and it had a little bit of that stuff in it. So, but I didn't work for a period of time after that, because it was like, I'm the dramatic, serious message kind of guy. So I knew that I had to switch it up and do something, switch my career up as a director and do something that was more, pop oriented, whatever, right? And it's not that I looked down on action pictures, because I grew up watching various genre films. I love action pictures. I love adventure movies, actually. I call them adventure movies. I don't even call them action pictures. Action pictures denotes just straight gratuitous violence and just whatever. Like an adventure movie is like Gunga Din. You know what I mean? Where characters going on a adventure and they're changed from the experience of it, right? Or Bridge on the River Kwai, or Lawrence Arabia. That's an adventure movie. Those are not action movies, right? And so that's what I kind of aspire to. And so I ended up getting the rights out of Warner Brothers, ironically, to do Shaft, and took it to MGM. MGM was going to make the movie because they made the original movie, but they lost the rights to do movies. And so MGM couldn't afford to do the movie, so we got like maybe $2 million in development, or $1.5 million, something like that in development. And I ended up calling up Paramount, and I took it over to Paramount. They bailed me out from MGM, and we made it at Paramount because they had a summer date. They had a summer date, and they needed one other tentpole, and so we ended up making it there. And so it was my first straight action kind of play.
What was your interaction like with Gordon Parks?
Phenomenal. I mean, I got a chance to spend time with Mr. Parks before I even made Shaft, and he used to have an apartment over here near the UN building and stuff, and I'd go up and I'd sit up and talk to him, and we'd make dinner together, and he was a kind of a consummate Renaissance man, and the thing that he imparted to me as a young filmmaker was, don't limit myself to film. Really immerse myself in all the arts. Try music. Try composing. Write some books. Continue to take pictures and work on my photography, and just really to be in his mode, kind of a cosmopolitan, person, to be not necessarily a jack of all trades and master of none, but someone who is open to various forms of creativity. And that's one thing that I really got from him, is that he had a very, very full life, because he was the kind of person who had very eclectic tastes, and he could flow in different worlds. Gordon Parks was mainly the true Shaft, because as you look at that picture, the original film, Shaft was just as much at home downtown as he was uptown, and that was Gordon Parks. And so, that's the way I look at things. It was and then there's very few people that can do that can traverse various worlds, and so that's what I learned from him.
Describe your directing style.
My directing style is part a lot of pre-planning and thinking out stuff, but honestly speaking, a lot of it is improvisational, because you can pre-plan as much as you want, but when you're on a set, you're dealing with actors and dealing with various elements. You have to be open to what's there in front of you, and move all these disparate parts towards an end to tell the most cohesive entertaining story as possible. See, some directors, they actually plan so much that there's so much in a box that they can't see it out of that box that they put it in, even when they're in reality. But you have to be able to take reality and put that reality into that box and make that box a new reality, a new experience. And so I feel like, some of the best stuff I do is really like thinking about it, reading the scenes over and over again, talking to the actors, talking to the various people about what it is, and then going on and making it what it has to be.
Is there one example you can think of where you really felt that magic happening?
It happens every day. It happens whenever I'm working. It happens. It's not one of that, but it happens every day when I'm on there, because it's not hard anymore. It's like, for me, it's like being playing with playing my instrument with some other people that actually play. They say the old jazz musicians talk about they don't care who you are, where you're from, what race, what color, what country you're from. If you can play, right? So it's like when I go onto something and I'm dealing with the new crew and everything like this, I'm playing. And my energy, I let my energy pervade on everyone else, and they play. They play better than they do with somebody else. And so I feel like that's where I've started to look at it over the years. It's like, well, okay, we could do this in a different way,
Wow. I was going to ask how you have seen your directing style change over time. It sounds like part of that has to do not just...
I'm more confident. More confident. I think Boys was a false confidence. Boys was like me, like I remember when I was on the set of Boys in the Hood, I said, okay, we're going to do this shot. It's going to be just like Scorsese would do. And this shot's going to be like what Spielberg would do. And this is like, this is right from Truffaut. Truffaut did this shot in 400 blows. And I remember the DP said, no, this is a John Singleton shot, And I was like, what? I didn't know anything back then, but that's good. It's great to not know anything. It's like, I feel like I don't know anything now. I don't know anything now until the actors show me what it is. Until I see things choreographed and I see like, and see what the movement's going to be. And then I find out, okay, maybe that's it. And I still don't know what it is until we put it on there and I see it played back and cut together. I still don't know. There's an excitement in that. I think a lot of filmmakers take out the spontaneity of what it is. I mean, we work and we're entrusted with millions of dollars of different things to apply our craft because, if you get to a certain level, you have a track record where you're able to deliver. There's only certain people that can actually deliver. There's more of a want of various people to deliver, but there's only certain people that can actually deliver on a consistent basis. And I like to think of myself as being one of those types of people.
Is that sense of improvisation part of what's exciting about working with first-time actors, like with Janet, with Tupac, with Ice Cube?
Well, for me, back in the day, that was just because that's who I wanted to hang out with. People were in. I think I put more musicians or hip hop musicians in pictures, and they've had careers than anybody else. Is because I'm not a rapper. I don't make music, but I like to. Most of the people I know then, whatever, socialized with were in the music business.
You've made some cameo appearances in some of your films. Why do you do that?
Just a thing, homage to what Hitchcock used to do. Alfred Hitchcock is one of my cinematic idols, and he did it in a whimsical way in some of the pictures, and I like to do that.
I want to ask you if your writing process has changed. You took us back to the days when you were on the floppy disk, right? Do you write stuff out? Do you type stuff out?
I write longhand. I write everything longhand first, and then I type it out. I feel like that the mind moves quicker than your hands on a keyboard can. So if you can write it out, and you can change your idea, and you have it in your notebook. It's organic. It's there. You can touch it. You can feel it. When you get on a computer and you compose your ideas, you may second think yourself and then delete it. And it may be something that you really, really had an inspired thought that is there, and it's not there anymore. And so I'm kind of old-fashioned where I think that people should write. They should write stuff out longhand. It's a matter of having like hundreds and hundreds of thoughts and musings and ideas and notations on various pieces of paper where you can just look at it and have a reflection. And then when it's just great. It's also great for archiving too, because you can look back and see. You can see in my notebooks where I came up with the idea for something that happens in any one of my other movies, because I learned how to do that in school.
So you've kept your notebooks?
All my notebooks, I have them all.
That's precious material.
Yeah. My kids go and read them through and everything and stuff. I get pissed off and say, no, be careful with that shit.
Because is it just ideas for films, or does it combine other personal
reflections? Ideas for films, personal reflections, ideas for films, different things,
What do you like about writing?
That it's introspective. I like writing because it's introspective. It's a kind of a serendipity kind of thing where you're really in a place that no one else can be but you at that time, and then it's your decision to share with the world if you want to or not. So that's what I like about writing things longhand on pieces of paper.
Do you feel a different sense of what your approach is to writing for film versus television?
Not at all. Not at all. I think it's very much the same thing. Very much the same thing.
Even though the structures are kind of different.
Because television is becoming, they're all merging now. There was a time where television was mostly just really verbiage.
Yeah.
And it was like trying to put words in people's mouths, even if nothing had to be there. Now television, you have huge swaths of time where characters don't have to necessarily say anything, where the visual storytelling is being told with sparse dialogue. And it's beautiful because it's more cinematic. Everyone's watching television now on these huge flat screens that are built like movie screens, and they're watching them in a kind of a cinematic thing. There's no 4:3 kind of thing anymore with that boxing thing. You don't have to frame for that anymore. We frame now for, in a kind of aspect ratio that was made for film, for TV as well. And so that's what really excites me about it, because the medium has changed. It's changed.
Do you feel it's become more cinematic?
I think so. It's becoming much more cinematic.
Do you have a preference for one or the other?
I don't. I mean, I like TV now because it's like I can make a movie every other week, and I can play with things. It's like would you ask somebody, do you like playing at this playground that you can go to, every other day, and there's some new toys and there's new people to play with, and you can socialize with some new people, and every other day they're going to have a new apparatus that you can use, or you go over here to this place that maybe every few times you can go play with it, and maybe you won't have everything that you want. That's what it is,